Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. The Gender Gap is Costing You More Than Diversity, brought to you by Technology and Services Industry Association and sponsored by Tech Experts. My name is Vanessa Lucero, and I'll be your facilitator today. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. Today's webinar will be recorded. The link to the recording of today's presentation will be sent to you within 24 hours via email. Audio will be delivered via streaming. All attendees will be in a listen-only mode, and your webinar controls, including volume, are found in the toolbar at the bottom of the webinar player. We encourage your comments and questions. If you think of a question for the presenters at any point, please submit through the Ask a Question box on the top left corner of the webinar player. We will open it up for a verbal Q&A portion at the end of today's session. And lastly, feel free to enlarge the slides to full screen at any time by selecting one of the full screen button options, which are located on the top right corner of the slide player. I would now like to introduce John Ragsdale, our distinguished researcher and Vice President of Technology Ecosystems for TSIA. And as with all of our TSIA webinars, we do have a lot of exciting content to cover in the next 45 minutes. So let's jump right in and get started. John, over to you.
Well, thank you, Vanessa. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. I'm very pleased to have collaborated on the content for today's webinar with our partner, Tech Experts, who is a leading global provider of technical talent solutions and a trusted partner to some of the world's biggest brands. They help enterprises deliver exceptional customer experiences and results at scale. Their solutions cover the full customer lifecycle, including specialized technical support services, customer success offerings to help drive annual recurring revenue, and tech talent sourcing, providing quick access to skilled talent to build technical teams. And they keep a constant focus on representation at their sites across the globe, and they have a lot of expertise on today's topic, the gender gap, and what we can all do about it. It's been about 3 years since America and the world had an awakening about diversity, and companies began prioritizing DEI policies and hiring, creating DEI boards, and more. And now we're seeing more studies coming out, really giving us data that companies who embrace diversity are seeing financial results. A couple of examples, there's a McKinsey study showing that companies with more diversity in management are 36% more likely to have improved financial performance. A Gallup study found that companies with more diverse workforces had 7% higher employee engagement. And specific to today's topic, a PwC study found that companies with more women in management positions have customer satisfaction rates that are 5% higher. I'm here in Silicon Valley in Northern California, and the gender gap in tech is very real. And I have some sobering numbers here from DataProt that really shows the state of the gender gap in tech today. Only 24% of computing jobs are held by women. The percentage of female STEM graduates is about 19%, which means we don't have a great pipeline for female talent coming into the workplace. 20% of women over the age of 35 in tech are still in junior positions, which shows that the progression and talent management and mentoring is not happening. And finally, women leave the tech industry at 40% higher rate than men. And with these numbers, I can't say that you're hugely surprised at that. So I'm very happy that you joined us for this very important discussion. We have an amazing panel of women today, both from Tech Experts and from Microsoft. And I'm very pleased to turn things over to our moderator for today. Katie Delgado is Vice President of Engineering for Forbes Media. Katie, welcome and take it away.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. And as John said, my name is Katie Delgado. I'm Vice President of Software Engineering over at Forbes Media. As far as my background, I was actually a front-end developer for many years. And then when I got into leadership, I've worked for some big companies like GE and DXC. But my home is Forbes now, so I'm loving it there. And with that, I'll turn it over to the rest of the panel so they can introduce themselves, starting with Eileen.
So, hi, I'm Aileen Alkins, and I'm Chief Revenue Officer at Tech Experts. I also play a role across the group that Tech Experts belong to. And prior to Tech Experts, I ran the Global Customer Service and Support Organization at Microsoft.
Savita?
Over to Savita.
Thank you, Aileen. It's tough to come after Aileen, but I'm going to try my best. My name is Savita Bradu, and I'm the Global Client Delivery Executive at Tech Experts. I've been in the tech space serving tech customers for about over 15 years, and prior to Tech Experts, I was part of Concentrix, serving enterprise tech customers. So I'm very excited to be here.
I guess I'm next. My name is Yolanda Natal Santos. I'm a Senior Business Program Manager with Microsoft Leap. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the program, Leap was developed as a way of sourcing and developing untapped talent for Microsoft in the tech industry. I myself was an apprentice in the very first cohort. I had a nearly 10-year gap in my resume, and through Microsoft Leap, I was able to return back to Microsoft. In this role, I am now focused on business development as well as the expansion of this program, both by discipline and geographic location. So it's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you for the introductions. And we're going to dive into some questions now. As John said, I do want to highlight the staggering statistic that women really only hold about 24% of technical roles. And even more staggering is 22% or less are leadership roles. So with that statistic, what impact does the lack of diversity have on the tech industry? And I'd really like to pass it to Aileen first.
I would say I would split it into two and say that the first impact we should consider is one of the challenges that all companies are facing right now, and that's the ability to attract technical talent. There's a global shortage, as we all know, of technical skills. Very high numbers of open positions for developers, cyber engineers, AI specialists. And if we don't have a diverse workforce, we know that it is harder to attract talent when we don't have a workforce that represents the people applying. And if we think about Gen Z, who are the people that we would be wanting to come into a lot of these tech roles, for them, diversity is important. They do want to know who they're going to be working with. A culture of inclusion is very important as well. So I would say one of the first challenges for companies, if they are not focused on diversity, is the ability to attract talent. And given that the women make up 50% of the world's population and the workforce potential, we're missing out on just enormous talent availability because they just won't want to join the companies that are not diverse. At the same time, attrition. So John mentioned the attrition stats and women leaving the tech sector at a much higher rate. And again, when you are in an environment where you're not feeling aligned with the culture of the organization, it doesn't feel so inclusive, you don't feel so well represented, then again, it's a contributing factor to attrition. So I think the first major impact is really around attracting and retaining talent, especially now with the challenges that the world is facing with digital skills gaps. The second one, I won't repeat some of John's comments, but it's the business impact. There's enough research out there that we will have all read with the statistics on the impact on business performance, the more diverse your organization is. So those two things, I think talent, and of course, talent is needed for good business performance and proven results on business performance.
Wonderful, thank you. And I'll ask another question to Yolanda. What forms do you think bias typically take? Are there differences among countries and industries?
Yeah, thank you. We've already talked about some stats that sort of touch upon this. We know that gender diversity remains an issue within the tech industry. John alluded to the number of women who are not participating in these tech fields. So we have enough data that shows that over the course of the last 30 years, we're seeing less women participating in these technical fields. And then reports by like the National Center for Women in Information Technology also alludes to the idea that even those women who are going into the field are dropping out of the workforce from the technical perspective, going on to other work at an alarming rate. So if we look at it from that perspective, gender bias really comes into the workplace in different ways. It manifests itself in different ways. One of the ways we often talk about is unequal pay. According to Glassdoor, for example, women in the tech field were earning about 75% to 80% of our male counterparts. Women of color particularly suffer the largest pay gap, according to the ADECO group. The ADECO group also tells us that Native American women, for example, in the US, they represent about 0.03% of the workforce in tech, and they are earning about 60 cents on the dollar. Women that are identify as Latina or Hispanic, they represent about 1% of the workforce, and they're making 57 cents on the dollar. And then Black women or African American women, according to ADECO, represent about 3% of the workforce in tech, and they're making 64 cents on the dollar. So when we think about equity, when we think about pay, we really need to think about equity, pay. That pay inequity is a symptom of a broader problem. And really to fully understand the picture, employers need to think about not just equal pay for equal work, but the pay gap and how it manifests itself in inequities in hiring, promotion, performance assessments, and as mentioned before, retention as well.
I believe Sabita has a little extra input on this.
Yeah. Thanks for that. I mean, great points, Yolanda. I think one of the things that I would say, just from my own experience, and when I look at my own journey, I started back in the day as a technical support advisor, and there was a lot of self-doubt when I started in the tech space, right? And I think one of the things that I encourage women when I talk to them today is to get out of their own way sometimes, and maybe a slightly different perspective, but there is a part of bias which is self-inflicted and we inflicted upon ourselves because we don't see a lot of women role models around us, especially in the tech space. I mean, everyone talked about the statistics. I mean, overall, it's true across all industries, and it just gets worse in the tech space. And so if you are starting out in an environment like that and you don't see more versions of yourself, you start to doubt yourself that, was this the right decision? Am I in the right place? And am I going to be able to be successful? Because, I just feel like the odd one out. And we just have to continue to push against the self-inflicted bias that we have as women as well, to just, push forward and do what we are passionate about. And if tech is what we are passionate about, then not to be intimidated and daunted by, an industry which is ever evolving. And it is a very challenging space because you have to continue to keep yourself updated. You have to continue to learn, and things are changing at a very fast pace in this industry. So you can never be in a complacent state. And all of that can become intimidating if you couple that with just, everything else that everyone's talked about, which is, the whole gender disparity and what we see around us. So just wanted to put that out there, that sometimes, we also tend to get in our own way because we get so threatened with lack of role models.
Yeah, and actually, I'll stay with you, Savita. Where do the solutions lie? What can businesses do to have a meaningful impact on recruiting and retaining female talent, and more specifically, WOC?
Wow. I mean, there are multiple layers to that, right? I mean, you could say, it starts from very early stages of how things are being done in academic space with, encouraging more young girls to take on STEM and educate themselves in the space of, technology, maths, and sciences, which can be a good career progression into having a career in the tech space. And then you can argue, well, you've got to then keep women there and ensure that they are, further educating themselves and sticking to that. And then all of the usual answers on, what would it take to solve this problem, but they're far from easy, because we've got to just optimize on creating an environment where you could start your tech career no matter what your background is, what you studied in school, because you can learn all of that. And there is just so much out there in terms of, upskilling tech talent, which I know that, 15 years ago when I started, wasn't available, right? So I think that the opportunities are far more for you to train yourself, upskill yourself, look for opportunities out there that, irrespective of what you studied in school or what you went to school for, may not matter. I think from a leadership perspective, the reality is that it is tough to progress, because you can start, but then, as your career is starting to mount up, so are your personal commitments. And I think we've heard Indra Nui talk about how a woman's career and personal commitments are in complete conflict, because as you're starting to get into middle management, you also is the time when you want to have kids, and then you have aging parents. So it's not just, again, specific to the tech space. I would say as leaders, we just have to be very honed into the talent that we have, how we're attracting talent and how we're keeping them, and the ways in which we can give women more opportunities to balance their, personal commitments and what comes with the tech space. I think that's incredibly important.
Yes, absolutely. And I want to turn it over to Yolanda and especially get your perspective on WOC or women of color. What can businesses do to have that meaningful impact for women of color?
Yeah. So if I like to start by saying, I think in order for us to truly be successful in this space, we have got to stop thinking of diversity as a one-time campaign, a check and done. Instead, really, diversity requires a continuous work in development and cultivation of these programs. Programs like Microsoft Leap, I know I'm biased, but programs like Microsoft Leap were developed in part to address some of these issues and to create a more inclusive workforce. We bring talent not just for Microsoft, but for the tech ecosystem. That's the great partnership that we built with tech experts, where we brought talent to Nigeria, Rwanda, and Bulgaria. And tech, and though Microsoft Leap as a whole globally, we enjoy a conversion of 98%. 98% of our candidates are gainfully employed in the tech industry. We've redefined where great talent looks, what it looks like and where it comes from. Some of our candidates do not have a college degree. Tech may be a second career for them, or individuals like myself, we have a gap because we're a returning parent. That's an untapped talent market that we haven't looked into. And with partnerships like tech experts, we're bringing that talent to the tech ecosystem, not just to Microsoft. But to address some of the specific questions you were asked, we need to also think about what we're doing in the pipeline we talked about a little bit. But when we are interviewing candidates, we need to make sure that those in the interview loop represent that diversity that we want. We need to make sure that we have accountability at the executive level. And we need to make sure that we have a way of measuring diversity in a more objective way, and that it's tied to rewards and performance, because that's sometimes how we're going to get the needle to move. So it's thinking of it holistically and thinking of it from not just a perspective like a spreadsheet where it's checked and done, but thinking about it through every decision that we're making throughout our sort of corporate decisions, because we know when there's enough data that correlates the women and underrepresented as being a better financial outcome for the company. So again, it's a holistic approach to it, and particularly when it comes to women of color. So if you think of the numbers of women overall represented in tech, the number of women in color are even smaller than the overall number of women who are in tech. So it becomes even more of a dire situation.
Thank you. Aileen, I wanted to ask you, when talking about mentorship and sponsorship, different things, right? Why are they different? How are they different? And how do they play a role in increasing the number of female leaders in tech?
I think, so first of all, if I take mentorship, many companies, we've all been involved in mentorship programs that have been created, and particularly focusing on mentoring, new women into an organization, young talent in an organization. So for me, mentoring is very much about helping people through their career with how to approach things. I think of that more as a how, as a sort of guide for how to approach things, how to think about things. And that's where a lot of companies have placed their attentions. Now, sponsorship, I think less companies focus on sponsorship as a program. And the way I think of sponsorship, when somebody sponsors you, first of all, you can't ask somebody to be your sponsor. You can ask somebody to be your mentor, but a sponsor is somebody who trusts you, who feels confident in recommending you because they believe that you're going to do a good job. They believe that you will represent well their referral of you. So a sponsor for me is somebody who opens a door for you. They'll tell people about you when they know of opportunities. They will introduce you to people where there are opportunities, whereas a mentor helps you what to do once you've got through the door. So sponsor opens the door, a mentor helps you with what you do once that door, what to do once that door is open. I think they're both very important because as I said, mentoring is really focusing more on helping people with the how, but without the sponsorship, the opportunities don't often get opened. We all know that when positions become available, very often they're filled even before they're posted. So even once they're posted and people apply, preferred candidates are already there. And so because we tend to hire people like ourselves and because of the lack of women in tech positions, we're just sort of continuing this challenge of not having enough women coming into the position. So sponsorship is crucial for getting women sponsored into positions, not just from male colleagues, but from other colleagues who are aware of the roles and will refer them, introduce them, make recommendations for them. But I don't think we do enough on sponsorship programs. We tend to focus more on just the mentoring part of it.
Yeah. And Yolanda, I'd love to hear your input on this one as well, as far as the role of mentorship, sponsorship play, and how do they make an impact?
Yeah, I agree. And going back, I do see a mentor, and that's a relationship that you have with a protege or a mentee. This individual, as Eileen mentioned, answers questions, may help you strategize your career and help develop that next move. But a sponsor is a person who promotes you as the mentee to others to help advance your career into others rather than a one-on-one relationship. There's a really cool, it's a very short but very powerful TED Talk by Carla Harris. And she talks about sponsorship as the most critical relationship in your career. That's pretty powerful. So when thinking about the sponsor, we need to make sure that that person obviously has your best interest at heart. She also advises us to make sure that this individual has the power to get it done. Whatever it looks like for you, the individual, the sponsor, must have that power, that respect, that mutual respect from their colleagues to get things done behind closed doors. If I may, much like that famous song brought from the Broadway play Hamilton, that sponsor has to be in the room when it happens in order to advocate for you, for that next promotion, for that next project, for that next job, whatever that might be, whatever that it might be. And so while these two roles are very important in your career, you need to understand that they serve different purposes and achieve different goals.
And I'd like to add to that one, actually. The question that comes to my mind when I'm looking at this mentorship versus sponsorship, you're probably thinking, how do I do that? How do I get a mentor? How do I get a sponsor? So a good example, I had someone on my team the other day, a female on my team reached out and said, I'm sure you have a lot of people that you're probably sponsoring right now, but I would love to work with you. And I said, actually, no one has ever asked me that. Not once. Yeah, actually, so it worked out wonderfully. So, ask that question if you're interested, because a lot of people assume that someone doesn't have the time or that they're not interested or, it's a small item for them, but they might enjoy it. They probably have the time, and you'd probably be the only one that asked. So hook yourself up.
And if I may add, again,
yes.
Going back to Carla Harris and her TED Talk, she talks about when selecting the sponsor to think about two things. And I thought it was pretty important. She talks about performance currency. And that in essence is our deliverables, what we're asked to do, and adding a little bit more to that because we want to raise our level of visibility. We want our colleagues to know our body of work. And then she talks about relationship currency. And that's really an investment in the people in your environment and around you, because it's important for them to understand your body of work. So she encourages us to engage and give an opportunity for others to build that trust with you and reliability. So much like what you said, oftentimes I don't think of the sponsors as somebody I asked, but I have asked, and I did look for an individual who I thought had that power, had that vested interest in my career to be that sponsor in the room. So you don't know until you ask.
Absolutely. And Savita, I'm sorry, I thought that was you speaking a moment ago, but I think you had something to add.
No, I was actually looking at the question that we had in the chat from Jessica. The only thing that I will say, Jessica, on the question that you asked is I felt exactly like that multiple times in my career. And I'm pretty sure that I will continue to be in the same space in the future as well, where there are going to be moments where you feel that your ideas are shut down or you're not getting your voice heard, or your ideas are just not getting the credibility that they deserve. Leaving an organization is definitely not the answer, because you're going to continue to find an environment like that everywhere in pockets. No organization is immune to that. So my only guidance there would be that you have to continue to focus on what your strengths are, what you're good at, and continue to articulate your ideas in a way that they are going to be heard. So understand the dynamics of who the decision makers are, who the influencers are. And, if you are able to present what you're presenting with facts and data, very quickly you'll realize that people are going to start paying attention. The only thing that I will say is that it's important to have a lot of resilience in this environment. Tech is an extremely competitive space, and because it is also very male dominated, there is a long way to go before you're going to see just naturally people getting inclined to just behaving in a different way. So we just have to continue to keep pushing boundaries and keep making our presence felt in a conducive manner, in a respectful manner, but at the same time in an assertive manner. So that's probably the only guidance that I would have from my own experience of there are more times I think that I've been shut down than being heard, and that's absolutely okay, because it doesn't discourage me from continuing to just move on and do what needs to be done. So,
and just for everyone's awareness, Jessica in the chat had asked basically for some suggestions about being heard. But read the question just to understand the basis of what Savita was saying. I'm sorry. And actually, while I have you, Savita, the next question is for you. So we're just wondering how much of a solution, as far as mentorship, sponsorship, I think we're still talking about that a bit, but as a whole with the tech industry, how much of the solution lies with business leaders, and how much of it should be an individual contributor's responsibility?
It's a combination of both, if you ask me. But what I will say that there is a bigger responsibility that lies with the leaders to show up, be and do better. Especially, when you know that irrespective of gender, there is disparity, and there is work that needs to be done to continue to bridge that gap. So all leaders have to take that personal responsibility and accountability to create an environment of better sponsorship and better mentorship, and drive that in their environment and outside of their environment within their network, so that we can continue to bridge that gap faster. The individual part of this to me is just as critical, because unless you are driven and inspired to just continue to push through, it's going to be very difficult for you to find the right sponsor and the right mentorship. So you have to take accountability for your career. You have to own it, and own your space, and continue to push that forward, and not wait for anybody to do that for you. If you do find great sponsors and mentors who will do that for you, that's great. But that shouldn't be the mindset. Should be that and this is just me personally, that you're enough, and lean in and help more people around you. And with that attitude, you will definitely get noticed, right? So irrespective of what role, what position you're in, if you are leaning in and helping people around you, you will get more promoters and supporters and sponsors and mentors to help you. There are a lot of good people who want to see a lot of women successful and succeed in the tech space. So you have to believe that there is always space for more. That's what I would say.
Yes, thank you. And I'll ask the question to Aileen. What can businesses hope to gain by increasing the number of women in tech roles?
Honestly, I think I'm going to take us back to the beginning with John's comments and my answers to the first questions, which is really around, if you connect the ability to attract and retain talent, to grow talent, and given that women, as I said, are 50% of the world's population, there's a great abundance of talent that is not being leveraged and utilized in the best possible way. And the direct connection that all of the research shows with more diverse organizations in terms of business performance. So I think it's that connecting the dots, attract more women, retain more women, and achieve better business performance. What could be better?
Definitely. And Yolanda, do you have anything to add on that one?
I'm re-emphasizing what's already been said by both Jine and Aileen. I'm always taken back when I think about the abundance of research that shows that companies are simply more profitable when they have more women in the C-suites, yet we still have a gender gap in technology. Just adding some data here, Forbes had an article on how diversity generates more revenues. They compared companies and found that the higher gender diversities truly just outperformed on average the less diverse companies over a period of 5 years. The Boston Consulting Group partnered with the Technical University of Munich, for example. They conducted a study, looking at the relationship between diversity and management. To know, at least no surprise on my side, the results showed that increased diversity in leadership, which we mentioned earlier, leads to more innovative and improved financial performance in both developing and developed countries. MIT also talked about gender diversity and how it impacted their better for their bottom lines. So, who doesn't really want that, especially right now? But if all of that wasn't compelling enough, which is back to what Aileen had said, we know that in the entire tech ecosystem, there's a tech crisis that requires greater participation from women in underrepresented groups. Women represent nearly 50% of the global population. So if we don't hire, if we don't coach, if we don't promote, we are leaving a large pool of untapped talent on the table. So I'll get off my soapbox, but that's what I know.
We like you on your soapbox. So then while I have you, in your view, what is the single most important action that a business can take to support females?
Yeah, and I think it goes back to something I had said earlier. If we are going to be successful in this space, we have got to stop thinking of diversity and inclusion as a one-time campaign. We need to continue to invest in develop programs. We need to continue to cultivate this programs like Microsoft Leap and others who bring in this untapped talent. We need to make it as part of every decision that we make across the workforce, thinking about how we can become more inclusive. And we know, as we've said, and the data shows that by building products, tech companies are building products for a diverse population. So it simply makes sense to me that we have a representative workforce to help build better products to achieve that corporate financial goal.
Absolutely. And, we're running out of time, but if I could get a quick answer from Savita and Eileen, it would be wonderful. So just what is the single most important action to you, Savita, that businesses can take to support women?
We should focus on hiring as many inclusive men and rally to change the thought process of ones that are not, because they're the ones that are going to help us, make the change that we want to see. And of course, if you are a woman in the tech space, it should be personal to you to make sure that you are rallying around female employees and being the role model and helping women around you grow and develop. That's what I would say.
Thank you. And Aileen, what's your opinion?
Trying to come up with a different answer that isn't run all the programs and do all the things that we've talked about. So I would say an answer that I gave on a previous panel, let's encourage more fathers of daughters to be mentors and coaches for women in the workforce, because then it's very personal. They can understand what their daughters are going to be facing, and it gives them a personal reason to participate.
That's a fantastic point. Absolutely. Well, thank you everyone for the fantastic answers. And I'm going to turn it over to Vanessa so she can do some Q&A.
Okay, thank you all so much. And just as a reminder, if you have a question for any of our speakers today, please enter it in the Ask a Question box in the top left corner of the webinar player, and we're going to get through as many questions as time allows. Our first question here comes from Rory, and they say, hello, I work with a federally funded workforce development program through which we can award job training grants to individuals who need to gain skills and obtain credentials to be more competitive to return to work, usually after a layoff. We strongly encourage women to consider IT. My question is, do you know of any associations, organizations, etc., that offer mentoring and or career coaching to help guide women in their entering and continuing on their career path to IT? Aileen, do you have thoughts on this subject?
Well, amazingly, this question could have been written by me. So actually, we have a sister company to Tech Experts, which is called Elevate. And Elevate is a digital skilling company. So Rory, just to give you an example of one of the programs we work on, and it's an employability program. We're currently running it in Costa Rica. It's funded by the government. It's for unemployed people. They particularly focus on women, and it is a 4-month program that teaches them technical skills. Some of it is AWS sponsored content. Some of it is Microsoft sponsored content. And at the end of this program, we're helping these ladies and men as well, but it's a high portion of women, with career coaches and conversations with potential employers in the country. And it's an example of programs that we run at Elevate for employability, with a particular focus on helping people find jobs in the IT sector at the end of the program. So yes, I do know of an organization that does that, and it's called Elevate, and we'd be very happy to have a conversation with you.
Thank you, Aileen. Our next question comes from Coleman, and they say, what are some of the best practices or initiatives that can be ran by companies to mitigate gender biases? Yolanda, I'll kick it over to you first.
Yeah, what some of the data that I've run across is examining, for example, the recruitment process. We know that, for example, women tend to not apply for jobs if we don't meet like 100% of the requirements. So look at that job description, that JD, and see if there's a gender bias naturally in it that you can eliminate to encourage more women to apply. And then the second thing is, who is on your interview loop. We want to make sure that we encourage both the allies and the females and the women to be part of that interview loop, because again, we want to have that diversity in the interview loop that we desire from our general workforce. And then the third thing, which I mentioned earlier, was really accountability at an executive level, making sure that we can measure the success of some of these practices to make sure that they are gaining the results that we want in a way that's meaningful. Meaningful, we're not talking about 1%, we're talking meaningful employment and how it's going to make a difference across the board. Hope that helps.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Yolanda. And unfortunately, we are getting a little bit low on time. I know there are a couple questions we still haven't been able to answer here live, but don't worry, we haven't forgotten about you, and we will make sure to follow up with you personally. And with that, before we close for today, John, I know you have some exciting DEI events coming up. Can you please tell us more about them?
Absolutely. I just wanted to quickly highlight two things. First is that we will be doing a Women in Tech event at our upcoming event in Orlando on May 9th. Diane Brundage, who is our VP of Member Development, will be having a panel discussion. This is an event in the evening. It is a charity event, and all proceeds go to Girl Inc. So you can register for this in advance, and I would really encourage you to attend. And one final thing, diversity is a very broad topic, and we are doing some research at TSIA on the subject of neurodiversity in the workplace. There is a link to a poll in your resource list. It will take no more than 2 minutes, and I will be announcing the results of this survey on stage in Orlando. So if you can click through and participate, I would appreciate it.
Okay. Well, we have come to the conclusion of today's webinar. So just a few quick reminders before we sign off for today. There will be an exit survey at the end. If you could please take a few minutes to provide your feedback on the content and your experience by filling out that brief survey. And know that a link to the recorded version of today's webinar will be sent to you within the next 24 hours. I'd now like to take this time to thank all of our speakers, John, Aileen, Savita, Yolanda, and Katie, for delivering a truly outstanding session. And thank you to everyone for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us for today's live webinar, The Gender Gap is Costing You More Than Diversity, brought to you by Technology and Services Industry Association and sponsored by Tech Experts. We look forward to seeing you at our next TSIA webinar. Take care, everyone.
Bye.